In episode 52, titled Control Change with Versioning, Snapshots, Refresh Intervals, Traceability, the focus is on why versioning is one of the simplest ways to build trust, repeatability, and accountability into reporting systems. When metrics shift unexpectedly, people rarely assume a harmless technical reason. They assume inconsistency, and that assumption spreads fast. Versioning creates stable reference points, so results can be reproduced, explained, and defended, even when pipelines and definitions evolve. When versioning is treated as normal practice, change becomes something the organization can manage calmly instead of something it discovers through confusion. A version is a labeled state of data or code, captured so a report can clearly state what it was built from and what logic produced the result. That label can refer to a dataset snapshot, a pipeline build identifier, a metric definition revision, or a dashboard configuration state, and the label's job is to remove ambiguity. Without versions, teams talk about the report as if it is one fixed object, even though the underlying data and logic may have shifted several times. With versions, every output can point to a specific state, which makes later questions answerable with evidence rather than memory. Snapshots preserve historical truth at a point in time, which is essential whenever numbers need to stay stable after publication. A snapshot is taken at a known timestamp and treated as immutable, so the organization can refer back to it when comparing quarters, closing a month, or supporting an audit request. This stability matters because real-world data is messy, with late-arriving records, corrections, and upstream changes that can rewrite yesterday's totals if the system is purely live. A snapshot gives the organization a shared baseline, allowing subsequent corrections to be handled as explicit adjustments rather than silent rewrites. Refresh intervals should match decision speed and cost, because not every metric deserves minute-by-minute freshness, and not every pipeline can afford it. Short refresh cycles can support operational response, but they increase compute load, amplify the impact of transient upstream issues, and sometimes produce partial refresh states that confuse users. Longer refresh cycles can improve stability and reduce cost, but they can be too slow when the decision window is narrow, such as during incidents or rapid business shifts. The governance move is to decide refresh cadence intentionally for each artifact, aligning timeliness to real decision needs rather than to an abstract desire for the newest possible number. Traceability connects numbers back to sources, which is what makes versioning useful beyond a label. Traceability means that when a leader asks why a metric changed, the team can show what data sources were used, what transformations occurred, and what version of the logic produced the final value. This reduces the common failure mode where teams debate whether a change is real or a reporting artifact, because the chain of evidence can be inspected. Traceability also supports accountability because it makes it clear where a change originated, such as a source system update, a pipeline transformation, or a definition revision. Naming rules make versioning practical because names are often the first and most frequent signal people see. A good naming convention shows date or timestamp, scope, and purpose, so readers can tell whether two datasets are comparable and whether a report reflects the intended time window. Names also reduce accidental misuse, such as blending two vintages of data or pulling a development dataset into a production report. When naming is consistent across datasets, pipelines, and dashboards, the organization gains a shared language for versions that does not depend on tribal knowledge. Recording what changed, who changed it, and why creates the narrative of change that stakeholders need to interpret trends correctly. The record does not have to be long, but it should capture the nature of the change, the motivation, and the expected impact, such as whether historical comparability is affected or whether a metric definition was tightened. The who matters because it identifies an accountable owner who can answer follow-up questions, while the why matters because it prevents future teams from undoing a change that had a valid reason. This change record turns versioning from a technical detail into a governance control that supports organizational memory. A dashboard metric shift scenario illustrates why traceability matters, because metric shifts are where trust is tested. Imagine a key risk metric drops sharply overnight, and the organization wants to believe the improvement is real, but the shift feels too sudden to be plausible. With traceability, the team can show that a pipeline change removed duplicated events, that a source feed lagged and then caught up, or that a definition changed to exclude a category that was previously included. Without traceability, the organization is left with speculation, and speculation tends to erode confidence, even when the numbers are actually correct. Silent changes are especially harmful, so key datasets should require review before changes are deployed. Review can focus on whether definitions changed, whether schema changes will break downstream reports, and whether the change affects totals or trends in ways that must be communicated. The point is not to slow down all change, but to place friction where the impact is large, such as core sources of truth and executive-level metrics. When review is required for high-impact assets, teams still innovate, but they do so with controlled risk and with fewer surprise regressions. Rollback capability is the safety valve that makes change less scary, because it allows teams to restore a known good state when a change breaks outputs. Rollback only works when versions are real and immutable, because the organization needs confidence that returning to a previous version truly returns the previous behavior. A safe rollback also depends on knowing what downstream artifacts depend on the changed asset, so restoring one dataset does not create new mismatches elsewhere. When rollback is planned and tested, incident response for reporting becomes calmer because the team has a reliable path to restore service while investigating the underlying issue. Communication is part of change control because stakeholders interpret trends through context, and context is damaged when changes happen without explanation. When a metric definition is updated or a correction is applied, a small note that states what changed and what time window is affected prevents misinterpretation and rumor. Communication also protects analysts from repeated one-on-one explanations because the same clear message can be referenced consistently across teams. The goal is to make trend interpretation accurate so leaders respond to real movement rather than to artifacts of pipeline evolution. Version validation should use simple checks like counts, totals, and sample comparisons, because those checks catch many errors before they become visible in executive reporting. Counts can reveal missing partitions or duplicated loads, totals can reveal broken joins or scope shifts, and sample comparisons can confirm that individual records still look plausible after transformation changes. These checks are not substitutes for deeper testing, but they are efficient signals that the new version behaves similarly to the old one where it should, and differs only where it is intended to differ. When validation is routine, versioning becomes a quality system rather than a labeling exercise. A change control routine can be described as a repeatable sequence that turns change into a managed process. The routine starts by defining what is being changed and labeling the new version, then capturing a snapshot or reference point so rollback is possible. Next comes review for high-impact assets, followed by deployment with traceability markers that connect outputs to sources and code states. After deployment, validation checks confirm expected behavior. Communication informs stakeholders about interpretation impacts, and the change record preserves who changed what and why for future reference. To conclude, One traceability habit worth adopting this week is to ensure every important dashboard or report displays, or at least records, the version marker of the data and logic it used. That marker can be a dataset timestamp, a snapshot label, or a build identifier, but it must be consistent enough that two teams can compare what they are seeing without guesswork. This small habit shortens troubleshooting, improves trust, and makes governance feel concrete because it ties every number to an evidence chain. Over time, that consistent version marking becomes part of organizational literacy, and it is one of the most practical foundations for reliable reporting. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.